Okay, I decided to make a video working through some of these problems on the review guide just so you guys can watch it tonight so you can see what you're supposed to do. So I circled some on the review. Hopefully this thing focuses for me good enough so I can work through them. So the first one here, that is just a standard form parabola. Okay, if we're looking at number 2 here, then you need to FOIL this stuff out there. You're going to FOIL that out, and then you're going to multiply it all by that -3 after you FOIL it. And then it'll be in standard form. Alright, so that's on your notes from 3.1 how to do that. So just look back at those. But for the first one, since it's already in standard form, you want to use that -b over 2a to find the x coordinate, and then you plug it back in to get that y coordinate back out. Alright, so A is a -1, B is a -4, and C is a -5. So I'm going to plug those in. So it's -b over 2a. Alright, so plugging that in, double negative there turns to a positive, so it's 4 over -2, which that gives me my x coordinate for my vertex of -2. So I can go ahead and start that down here. Alright, since I have that x coordinate for my vertex, I know that my axis of symmetry is a -2. Alright, so I could just go ahead and draw that line if I wanted to, because I know that that point is going to be somewhere on that line. So when I plug in that -2, it will look like this. Okay, and the common mistake is right there. You forget about that extra negative out front. Alright, so this turns to a +4, but there's that negative out front there, so you can't forget about that. So it'll be -4 plus 8 minus 5. So that gives me, so -4 plus 8, that's a +4 minus 1, so that gives me a -1. So my vertex is -2, -1 right there. Alright, since that A out front is a negative number, I know that my parabola is going to open down like that. Alright, so let's start plugging in a couple points to see if we can get that parabola. So this is my line of symmetry. I want to do points next to it, so I'm going to use a 1 and a 0 with my XY chart, or -1 and a 0. Alright, and remember, I don't really have to do that 0 because I get a y-intercept of -5. So that's that one right there. So if I plug in a -1, remember you got to be careful about that negative out front. So it'd be -1 squared minus 4 times -1 minus 5, plugging in that point. Okay, so that turns into a +1, but it's still a -1 because of that negative out front. So it's -1 plus 4 minus 5. So that's going to give you -1, -2. Alright, so I have that point, and since I have that one, I can reflect it over here, and then I got that 0, -5 there. So then that's all you have to do for that parabola. Okay, all standard form parabolas, you're going to follow the same routine to do it. So -b over 2a, plug it in to get the y, and then XY chart with 2 points that are close to that line of symmetry there. Okay, now the other one I wanted to look at. So number 3, that's a vertex form, right? So that's got your h and your k. That's what it means to have vertex form, because it's x minus h plus k. So since it's minus h, that means your vertex is going to be a -6, and plus k, so that means it's going to be an 8. So it's vertex of -6 comma 8. This number right there, that -6, that's also my axis of symmetry. So I can go ahead and plot that point, -6, 8, and I can draw my axis of symmetry. Okay, the number out front is just a 1, so I know this parabola is going to be opening up. So I'm going to kind of run off my graph a little bit here, but that's okay. You also run off your graph a little bit with your vertex on this one. Okay, I think you get 112 maybe. Okay, but this one right here, since I have my vertex, I am going to do the same thing like I did up above, and I'm going to make an XY chart. And I'm going to use points close to that line. So I'm going to use a -5 and a -4. Okay, so when you plug them in here, you do the parentheses first because it's PEMDAS, right? It's order of operations. So plugging in a -5, so that gives me 1 squared plus 8. 1 squared plus 8, that's going to give you a 9. Alright, so it's -5, 9. So I can go ahead and plot that point. So it's here and there. Then we plug in a -4. Alright, -4 plus 6, that's 2 squared. That's 4 plus 8, that gives me a 12. So it's -4, 12. So I would just do a couple extra marks up there. -4, comma, 12 is going to be up here-ish. It'll be there. So then there's your parabola. Okay? If you see something like that with the parentheses and a square, you're going to think vertex form. Okay, and then you do vertex form just like this. Every time you see the HK stuff, vertex form is like that. Okay, the other one that people had questions on was right here. Tell whether the functions have a minimum or a maximum and find the value of the max or min. So when you're looking for a minimum or a maximum, okay, so A is positive, so it opens up there. So this is going to have a minimum because it's got a bottom point. If I think about this one up here, A was negative. The number out front was negative, so it opens down, so this has got a max. Okay, so this one, since it's negative out front, we're going to have a maximum because it's going to open down like that. The A out front here is a +3, so it's going to open up like that, so this one's going to have a minimum. Okay, but we have to find those values. If you think about where they are, a maximum or a minimum is right on your vertex, so you have to do the steps in both of these. Okay, they have to be in standard form, and you want to find the vertex. So it'd be -b over 2a, and then you plug that in so it looks like this. That's just function notation. You want that number right there. Whatever you get after you plug that -b over 2a into the function. Okay, that's the front page. Okay, I got a few of them I highlighted on the second page that I want to work through. So I'm going to do one of these completing the square, and I'm going to do one of those with quadratic formula. Okay, so this is number 6, B, and D. So how do you determine which one you want to do? It doesn't really matter. You can do either one. Okay, so these you could do either one also, but I would try one of each. So for B, I am just going to do completing the square. So when we complete the square, actually I'm going to do quadratic formula here, right? Because we got everything, it's already in standard form. I'm going to do quadratic formula. So that's -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, and then you got to simplify. So that becomes a +3 plus or minus square root. So 3 squared is going to be a 9 minus that right there. If you put that in your calculator, it will give you 144 all over 8. Okay, simplify again. 3 plus or minus the square root of 9 minus 144. So that's a -135 over 8, and then you got to simplify that -135. Okay, so if we do that, then we got to make a factor tree. So it's -135, and you can take out a 5, and that would give you 27, and then 27 is actually 3 times 9. Well, 9 is a perfect square, so that's going to give us a 3 out front, and then you'll have 15 left underneath there. Okay, so it would be 3 plus or minus 3, since it's a negative, that gives us an I, and then we said we got 15 left underneath there over 8. Okay, so that would be acceptable for an answer. Now, with quadratic formula, I didn't do this a whole lot in class, but since that's an imaginary number, you would have to split it up. Okay, so remember, standard form is a plus bi for imaginary numbers. So it would be 3 over 8 plus or minus 3i square root 15 over 8. So that would be the technical answer, but I'm not going to be picky on that. Okay, so completing the square. So you want to move that over. So minus 2, move c over. Now we have this equals 5. Then you want to divide everything by that 3. So then we have x squared. So when we have that x squared, I'm going to leave a blank. Plus something equals 5/3 plus something. So now we take half that middle term. So it's going to be x minus 3/2 squared. So that means we're going to add 9/4 up here. Plus 9/4. So since we have this right here, you can use your calculator. I'm not going to use a calculator because I don't have one right now. But you want to get a common denominator of 12. So this would be 20 over 12. And this one would be 27 over 12. So we get 47 over 12. Now you're going to have to square root this, and this one doesn't work out very nice. Okay, so square root, square root. And if you're working through one of these on the test and you get to here like I am right now, I'm going to have to do something I haven't shown you guys yet, which is rationalize the denominator. If you get to this, then I would stop and say, ooh, it's not going to work very good, and do quadratic formula. Okay, so that would be x minus 3/2 equals square root of 47 over square root of 12. Move the 3/2 over. Okay, so I'd have 3/2 plus or minus square root of 47 and 12. I can simplify down to, that would be 2 square root 3. So I would say right there it's not going to work out very good, so I would go back and redo it with the quadratic formula. But to fix it, you're going to have to rationalize. So that'd be like multiplying by I. Okay, so we get 3/2 plus or minus, it's going to give me square root of 141 over 6. And then that would be good enough for an answer. If I wanted to fix it and make them together, then I would change this to 9 over 6. So it would be 9 plus or minus square root of 141 over 6. That's the answer you get when you do quadratic formula. Okay. So on to factoring. When you factor, it doesn't say factor and solve, it just says factor. So most of the time when you factor, you're going to end up with something that looks like this. Okay, you're going to have two parentheses and you're going to have an x in there. It'll be x minus or x plus something. Okay, when there's nothing out front like here and here, you just ask yourself, all right, what are two numbers that multiply to give me a 27? All right, so that would be 9 and 3 or 27 and 1. What are those two numbers of those factors? Which ones could you put together to give you a negative 6? Well, that's going to be the 9 and the 3. So it would be x minus 9, x plus 3. Because if I put a negative 9 together with a positive 3, that would give me that negative 6. Okay, so that's just reverse FOIL there. You do this one the same way and you do that one the same way. Okay, this one is actually a pattern that you can use though. Okay, this one is also a pattern. Now this one is difference of squares. I've said that a lot in class. So is that a perfect square? Yes. Is that a perfect square? Yes. So then what's the square root of the first one? 2x. What's the square root of the second one? 7. So you have two sets of parentheses, 2x, and you have one with a plus and one with a minus. That's your pattern for difference of squares. Now, third one. That one's a little bit harder. Okay, that would be a smile method. Okay, which since we have a 20 out front, first you look to see if you can take something out of there. We can't because that's even and these two are both odd, so there is no greatest common factor. Alright, so we'll have 4 and 5 for a factor there, and 10 and 2 and 20 and 1. On the back we got 7 and 3 and 21 and 1. So remember in class I said I would probably pick the smallest ones, so the 4 and the 5 there, and then I'd probably try the 7 and the 3, see if I can get to that 13. Alright, if I put a 7 here, okay, check my smile there, I get a 28x. If I put a 3 there, that gives me 15x. Can I put 15 together with 28 to give me that middle number of 13? Yeah, 28 minus 15, well, it'll be 15 minus 28. We want a negative 13. So it'll be 15 minus 28. So this has to be the negative one, that has to be the positive one. And that would be your factor, or your factoring process. Okay, so number 8 is the next one I want to look at. Factor and solve the following equations. So now, that's factoring. When we factor and solve, you would have something set equal to 0. Okay, so since we have the 0 there, we have to factor and then solve. So this is reverse FOIL. Two numbers that multiply to give you 30 and add to give you 11. Well, you should say, alright, 6 and 5. Now which one has to be negative and which one has to be positive? Well, since that's a positive 30, that's a negative 11, they both have to be negative. So negative 6, negative 5 equals 0. Okay? Then there's the property, the zero product property, where you figure out what you put in for x to make this 0, and then you figure out what you put in for x to make that 0. Or you just think opposite those numbers. So x equals 6 and 5. And you can check these by taking those and plugging them into here if you want to, if you think you have the wrong answer. Okay, so 8, A, B, and C, and D, you're all going to do the same. And if you didn't realize it, D, right there, is the same as E, right there. So if you're looking at this one, and you had it set equal to 0, so if you're looking at this one right here, you think of, alright, opposite this number, so it'd be a negative 3, and then divided by that number, so it's negative 3/4. So it'd be a negative 3/4 and a 7/5. And a 7/5. Those are your two answers for D. Okay, a few more here. E, F, and G. Those all have imaginary numbers in them, so when you write out your final answer, it's got to be A plus BI. Okay, so E, you just FOIL. So when I FOIL that, it's going to be boom, 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 FOIL. So it's 6 minus 18i minus 4i plus 12i squared. So remember, when you have an I squared, that's just a negative 1. So this really turns into a negative 12. So now you got 6 minus 12, which is negative 6, and then negative 18 minus 4, so that's negative 22i. And I'm going to keep the I on the right because that's standard form. I'm going to do G next because that's a little bit easier. Since you only have an I down here, that's your only problem. So you multiply top and bottom by an I. So it gives you 6i over 2i squared. Well, the 2i squared turns into a negative 2, so it's 6i over negative 2. That is negative 3i. Alright, now F. That one's a little bit harder because you have to remember, since we have more than just an I down there, you got to remember what you're supposed to do. So 3 minus 2i, we need to use complex conjugates. So that's the same thing. So it's 3 and a 2i, but a different sign in the middle. So you're going to have to FOIL on the top and the bottom. So if I FOIL the top, I get 15 plus 10i plus 6i plus 4i squared, and on the bottom I get, and remember this is difference of squares, so really I only care about those two, so it's 9, and then those two minus 4i squared, and then we simplify. So that 4i squared turns into a negative 4, that negative 4i squared down there turns into a positive 4, so it'll be 15 minus 4, which is 11, 10 plus 6, that's 16i, and on the bottom we have 9 plus 4, that's 13. Now the last thing you had to do, since it's not an a plus bi, you have to split it up between those two. So it'd be 11 over 13 plus 16 over 13i. Because that's standard form right there. That's that a plus bi, because you split it up. Okay, solving equations. And this is kind of like the square root property stuff that we did in class. So for all of these, you have to get x by itself. The harder ones are e and f, because there's a few steps that you have to do to get x by itself before you can actually get it by itself. So the first one, divide by 2, divide by 2. So 28 divided by 2, we got x squared equals 14. And then you square root both sides. Oops. Square root both sides, you get x equals square root of 14. But don't forget to add the plus or minus on them, because whenever you square root both sides, you have to do plus or minus. So it's plus or minus the square root of 14. Okay, next one here. Now you're going to think, all right, I'm going to take everything times 25. That gives you more work than you need. You got to move the 6 first. Okay, so plus 6, x squared over 25 equals 4. Now you take both sides times 25. So you get x squared equals 100. Square root, x equals plus or minus square root of 10. Or not square root of 10, sorry. Square root of 100 is 10, so x equals plus or minus 10. That's what we got. Okay, then e here. E is exactly the same as f, so if you follow the steps on e, you should be able to figure out f. Okay, so we need to get this stuff right here by itself first. So I'm going to add that 18 to both sides. So 7x minus 4 squared equals 28. Now I got to divide by 7, and now I have this. Now that should look familiar because we've had a ton of those in class the last few days. So square root both sides there, and you get x minus 4 equals, what's the square root of 4? Plus or minus 2. Move the 4 over. 4 plus or minus 2. Now you have to get two answers, once with a minus, once with a plus. So 4 minus 2, that's 2. 4 plus 2, that's 6. So those are your two answers, 2 and 6. Alright, I got a couple more I'll show you guys how to do. So spend some time looking at these. Now this last one here I'm going to do, maybe the last two, I might go through these quick. These were like the worksheet that we had. Okay, but now you actually have to sketch the parabola. That's what I did on the board every time I went through these. Okay, so I got a parabola, I got a flea that's jumping. So my flea is starting there at 0. The little guy is jumping to there. Okay, we're in centimeters, so looks like a big jump. It's not that big of a jump. Okay, then you look at the equation you're given. So what can I plug in for x here to make that equal a 0? Because we want to figure out, we got to change that to a 0, and we want to figure out the x-intercepts here. So I could plug in a 0 for that one because there's a variable out front. Now what can I plug in for this x in the parentheses there to get me a 0? Well, that would be a 33. So that flea is jumping from 0 to 33 centimeters. Okay, that one right there, that's your answer. So how far did he jump? 33 centimeters. Okay, now what was the max height? Well, we don't know that. All we know is how far the flea jumped. But we do know that the vertex there is going to be half the distance from 0 to 33. Okay, so that means my vertex, the x value, is going to be 17.5 centimeters. If you got an x value, how do you find the y? You're going to have to plug it into this equation up here. Okay, so if I plug that in, negative 0.073 times 17.5 centimeters. And now if I put 17.5 in there, 17.5 minus 33, well, you said that 33 or 17.5 was half of that, so it gives you negative 17.5. Put that in your calculator, and you end up getting 19.87 centimeters. Oops, 19.87 centimeters. So that's how high the flea jumped, was 19.87 centimeters. So up here I'm at 19.87 centimeters. That's the height of the jump. Okay, so that would be my parabola to model the flea. Okay, you need to label important points. Now you don't have to do that, but that would be an important point, that's an important point, and these are important points right there. Okay, so we got the last one here I'm going to do with the kangaroo. Okay, same kind of deal here. But now if you look at this equation here, that's a vertex form equation. That's my h, that's my k. So what does h and k tell you? That tells you your vertex. Okay, what's the kangaroo's maximum height? Well, if I know that my vertex is 14, 6, well, which one of those is going to tell me the maximum height? Well, if I do the same thing I did on the last one, kangaroo jumping, I'm right here at 14, 6. The y value is the highest point there, so the kangaroo jumped 6 feet. Alright, so now how long would the kangaroos jump? So we just kind of got to think backwards of the last one. Well, if I know that right here I'm at 14 feet, well, how far is it from here, and then how far is it from there? Well, this is 14 feet, that's 14 feet, so that means the kangaroo jumped 28 feet. From 0 to 28. So this right here would be 28 feet, and that right there is going to be 0 feet. Okay? So the rest of those on there are discriminants. That's what we just did yesterday, so you should be okay with that one. And then graphing these. So you might have to look in your notes or look in your book. Okay, the important thing here is that magnitude, right? Remember that's square root of a squared plus b squared. So you take this one, square it, take that one, square it. So just for a, I would have 9 plus 12. Square root of that, that's square root of 21. Can't simplify it, so you're done. And then remember the 3 is your x, the 4 is your y. So it would be 3, 4 for the point. So 3 plus 4i. That's how you graph that one. Okay? Hopefully this helps out. Spend some time watching the examples. If you don't remember how to do it, then try to watch the example again, or maybe look at the personal tutor. Okay? If you got questions, I will be here in the morning.